Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Brian. We're going to do a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is we're going to check out. Today's comes at us from Paul. Hey Brian, long time listener to your channel, first time requester. Actually, no, I did request Vector, but you kindly pointed out that you had done that one already. I'd love to request The Accuser by Alustrium. They are a technical death metal band from Philly that receive nowhere near the recognition they deserve. They have this picking precision that syncs up perfectly with the drums. I feel like it almost has a flamenco feel to it as well, but I'm sure you'll have a more precise vocabulary to describe it. Anyway, I just love the song. It was my #1 song of 2022 on Spotify, and I think you'll appreciate the talent. Also, they sing about mental health and other important topics rather than just hailing Satan, which I find refreshing. Keep up the great work. Thanks, Paul. And then I saw this artwork. I was like, okay. We'll see how this goes. Tech death. Sometimes it works for me, sometimes it doesn't. Let's see what's going on with Alustrium's The Accuser. Yeah, so we're in 11.8 right now. Oh, very clean way of cutting out that beat. Oh, really fun accent there. So we were in 6.8 or 12.8 for the lyrical section. We're back to 11.8 here. Yeah, really fun moment. Some vocal variety, I'll take it. That was clean. Fun little metric idea there. Variation on their previous idea with more drum fills. Layering on vocals and guitar on top of the previous idea. Was that all one breath on the vocals? There was not a break there. One of the few massive... Ooh. I think that was a new key. One of the few sonic changes we've had in the song. Very Tool-like with the toms and the muted guitars. Oh, I like that texture on top of all this. Yeah, real fun rhythm. We're having a tough time getting the time signature of it. I really dig the melodic element here. It isn't... It's not hyper complex, but it's dynamically complex by contrast. All right. Something, when was this? I just saw that Jeeps had also done it. Oh, 9 months ago. I'm behind on this. Yeah, same song actually. Very cool. I might have to check that out, especially, I don't like to watch reactions before I do the reaction because I think it spoils it, right? But for a band that has 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, I'm not privy to their Spotify numbers. I'm not going to go check it out right now either. Um, they don't seem to be a very big band. This seems to be the stuff that's very much in my wheelhouse. Really looking at some of uh, the lesser known bands and the niche genres and stuff, and to see it on a big channel like Jeebs's is pretty cool. Um, Anyways, so something I want to talk about real quick, and it's not really about this band, just about this genre in particular, actually kind of all metal, is that I'm going to extrapolate a little bit, maybe unfairly, that I'm going to wager most of the album sounds like this, right? Most bands tend to have a sound that they utilize through most of their songs on an album. Sometimes they might change their sound across albums, or they explore new guitar tones and stuff like that. Maybe they find new instruments, right? You get a new, a keyboard player, or you're between the buried and me and you discover auxiliary percussion. So you put in an entire auxiliary percussion section into your music. Um, but for the most part, a band makes a sound and they stick with it. And, listening to this track, it really wasn't until we got into that, was it the second guitar solo? When I mentioned that, the sonic quality had changed. We had a little bit of a key signature change, but also the song wasn't as oppressive at that moment. It felt like there was room in the upper area. The guitar was playing up here above the rest of the music, which up until that point, everything kind of just felt like this wall, right? The vocals, the drums, the guitars, the bass, they were all kind of in the same general area. And this actually felt like there was room above the band for once. And the guitar got to play up there in a higher register, and we had the key change, and it just felt like a breath of fresh air, like getting above the noise and being able to breathe clean air for once, before getting thrust back down into the weight of it all. But it dawned on me at that moment that the song doesn't really change sonically up until that point, and that was probably a good 7 minutes into it, which means that all of our attention had to have been kept from the very beginning based on the compositional ideas entirely. And like I said, I extrapolate out that the whole song or the whole album sounds similar to this, that they don't bring in other instruments or swap out guitar tones or have any song that is composed in a wildly different manner. Maybe that would emphasize higher end guitar ideas and melodic and harmonic components rather than textural rule of cool riff writing. If that's the case, once again, it's not just 8 minute song or 9 minute song. It's a 40, 50, 60 minute album that needs to keep your attention entirely on the compositional ideas, because the tone is never going to change in any meaningful way to create contrast like that. And I think it's really fascinating to think about music like this, which kind of envelops a lot of modern music. I've always talked some of my favorite bands in the past, especially my favorite albums, are ones where each song kind of have their own sonic identity through an album. I don't typically listen to a lot of albums that are static in the way they're presented, which is typically why I love more mainstream adjacent uh, albums, because those tend to be the ones who are a bit more experimental with their sound, where each track might sound differently, different guitar tones, different instruments, um, different electronic tones, right? All sorts of things. Um, but when you get into stuff like this and country and even radio rock, you end up with um, bands who keep your attention entirely on the composition, because there's no change to their sonic quality. Um, and I find that really interesting. It puts a lot of weight on the music to keep someone interested moment to moment, not on, well, I suppose in a term we could call it the paint, right? It's the exterior to the music, how the music is delivered. how it sounds, not what it's being played. Um, and even classical music, you have one orchestra or one quartet or whatever. You're not changing your sounds up, but there's going to be key changes. There's going to be mode changes. If you have a larger set like an orchestra, you can have, dancing between different instrument sets, big bombastic sections, or you can completely exclude the brass entirely and just do like a tutti with the woodwinds. Um, you can drastically change up the textures of your song moment to moment or song to song based on what instruments are allowed to play. Um, but with this, we have four instruments that don't change and primarily all use very similar keys throughout their album. This is pretty normal for a lot of metal and rock. And it just dawned on me that puts a lot of weight on the composition. I think I've talked enough about this, but it was racking my brain the whole time. I was like, this is kind of wild that I haven't gotten bored yet, but there's no sonic contrast. Every section is very similar at the highest level of the way it sounds. Anyways, though, getting back into this, kind of coming off of that, a lot of this is composed in a very similar style. I think there is a chorus section. I don't know if the lyrics are chorus, like if it's actually a repeated section, but musically, it sounds like a chorus. It's the biggest section. It has the hookiest. Well, it's because it has a hook. Nothing else really has a hook. I was going to say it has the hookiest music writing, but no, it actually has a hook to it. It has a melodic line that, while not incredibly engaging by what's on paper, sounds really great with what's going on around it. It is a little bit of a sonic shift there. And through that, much like our guitar solo that we hear later, it stands out quite a bit. It is one of the shorter sections, though. Um, but everything aside from those two moments is really technical, mostly palm muted or quickly played staccato notes. We do have some really neat rhythmic shifts from time to time. There is that wonderful metric modulation going on at one point where we start off with these really tight palm muted 16th notes and then shift into dotted notes, into triplets, into eighth notes. And it is like this grand slowing down that ramps right back up into something faster. I don't, maybe we went back to 16th notes. It was, man, it was just, that's a good little, it was a tie up to a phrase as well. Like when we came out of that, we started the phrase back over again. And so we got to hear it a few times as it was part of a riff that got looped. But a lot of this track is composed of these shorter lines, right? Or these shorter notes tied together in specific phrases. Now, the cool thing is, and what I think really ties this together and pulls it forward without it feeling stagnant, is all the metric modulation. We don't ever just play straight eighth notes or straight 16th notes, and there's no tremolo picking in here, I don't think. A lot of the times we are shifting the length of the notes to craft our riffs. All of our riffs, though, are these lower range, really tightly packed musical ideas. Um, Really sharp and abrasive. We don't ever really hear notes being held out in any capacity. I don't think we have any quarter notes in here at all. As a guess, right? There's just a lot of speed. Um, and they are supported by the drums, who are rhythmically in tune with what the guitars are doing. And this creates some really cool textural layering where the guitars are playing fast, maybe the drums are playing toms in that same rhythm, and then the guitars do this grouping 4/16 notes or something, and the drums shift over, for instance, to the hi-hat or to the ride cymbal, and we get the 4/16 notes there before coming back down to the toms. And so we get this really nice element where the guitars don't really change their texture, but they're layered against this ever changing texture in our drums. where sometimes we get the loud thud of toms, sometimes we get the crack of the snare, sometimes we get the variety of cymbal work that goes with it, but it's all done in the same rhythm. So we get that textural layering. It's very well done. And as with most tech death bands, it is extremely tight. And this is a really important part to tech death. Some of it is going to, a majority of it is going to be performance, the recording itself, and then there's going to be like 10% that goes into the production of really making sure that there's this finesse, this space between every note. Because a lot of this is, it sounds sharp and impactful. Because if you play da 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 da, even when I sing that, there is that release, right? When I say duh, there's that hang off, right? It doesn't stop abruptly. I can't do that physically. Duh, duh, duh. Even if I try to stop as abrupt as I can and put my tongue up to the top of my mouth to stop the sound flow and to stop the vocal cords all at the same time, there's still a little bit of that air that still has to come out, right? So the way that bands like this achieve it, this like really punchiness to it, is to put space between each of the notes. And part of that, like I mentioned, is going to just be perfecting yourself into a robot on the snare hits, on the picking, all of it, just to get to that robotic perfection. But there's still going to be a little bit, and the production comes in. And I don't know this as a fact. If anybody has insight into the production of tech death, I'm curious about this. Um, but I'd wager that there's a little bit of work that goes in to help put some extra space between some of these faster ones. It's not going to be every note because that's just going to be tedious. Like I said, a lot of this is coming from the performers. They are robots in this genre. But especially on the studio versions, you're going to get that extra punchiness on those fast, especially when you hit the 16th notes. Just carving out a little bit of extra space between them and allowing dead silence in between these really fast notes. And it is just, it is impactful and it works every single time. It's so good. There is just something about it. Oh, man. Now, we have all this technical element going on in our instruments. Rhythmic ideas, really sharp attacks, really quick performance, extremely precise. Nobody is hanging off a little bit or starting early. Everything is, it hits and it's off on every instrument participating. And there's a lot. We have at least 2 guitars, I think, and the drums and occasionally the bass all on these rhythms. So there's just really strong syncopation between everybody. Our vocalist introduces quite a bit of variety on themselves. I was a little unsure about the beginning. We come in strong, we get these vocals in, they're just growls, and he's got one hit, right? He's got one perceived tone out of this. He's got his vocal technique and he leans into it. I was like, oh man, 9 minutes of this. I hope there's not a lot of lyrics. Um, and not that it's bad, it's just it's, what I've said many times in the past is I like variety in my vocals. So I either need a lot of harsh vocal types or I need somebody who can create multiple pitches, perceived pitches with the harshes, or what I prefer is a nice mix of clean and harshes. So I was a little worried when he had just this one sound for the entire like opening minute or two. But then we got some really nice variety. We got some highs, and we kind of mixed up the highs and the lows, and then we got these whispers, and then we got these raspy whispers. That was actually terrible impersonation of what was going on in here, but you get the idea, right? It's lower pitch, but it has grit to it, right? And that was actually placed left and right as well. And then we actually got layered raspy vocals at different pitches and styles of compression that were layered, one in each side, doing the exact same thing at the same time. And so the back half of this track actually has some really cool contrasting elements with the vocal work. And actually, I want to lean into that just a bit. We'll, I don't know if I should save it until we hit the vocals. I mean, the lyrics. it was mentioned in the details, in the context, that this band deals with all sorts of topics aside from just Hail Satan. And one of the ones that were brought up was mental health. And so I'm curious if this song is about somebody who deals with mental health, right? And this would be the voices in their head that, speak negatively to them. Because that's what I noticed with the voices, that they were always like, did you think you could do this? Did you think you could get away with that? Did you think it was going to be easy? And they're all uh, very negative, very derogatory. And I wonder if that's what the purpose of them was, to be separate from this main voice, both in space and in delivery. So that's something I'm gonna keep in my back pocket as we head into the lyrics in a bit. Because if so, very cool. If not, I wonder what the purpose of them was. When we hit the lyrics, maybe it'll make more sense to me. Now, the last thing I want to hit on is emotion, right? We've gone through all the technical elements of how they're playing, what they're playing. What does the song tell me as a story, though? And honestly, all I feel is a lot of weight. So much so that, like I said earlier, when the guitar solo comes in and there actually feels like there's some space at the top of the sound sphere, it feels like a breath of fresh air. It feels like you can actually breathe, like you've gotten above the smog of the rest of the track. And you can take a big, deep, clean breath and be like, yeah, that's what that's like. This is good. I want more of this. And then you get pushed right back down into the smog, and it's this heavy, blackened weight. And it's just so aggressive. This is a track that feels like it is constantly finding new ways of adding a sort of pressure to the listener. And it's not in that wall of sound kind of post metal kind of thing, um, or just the frequent aggression of something a bit more extreme. This is just, it's a heavy tone, low end guitar work, and it's constantly changing. Every time you think you figured something out, there's a time signature change, or there's a rhythmic switch up, or we've changed to a new riff. And there's so many riffs in here. Like, there's no way I could break all this down on a single listen of each individual riff that they've got going on, which is why I kind of give that overview of how they craft a riff. Um, because there's just so much of it. The song feels simultaneously static, where it's the same idea over and over, but it's always changed up just enough that you can't ever expect what's around the corner. Even though you know what's around the corner, it's still more weight, it's more aggression, it's more fast technical playing with rhythmic mix ups, but you never know how they're going to achieve that. And so the song comes off, at least to me, very aggressive, very antagonistic, very weighty, until we have one moment to get above that, to shed the weight, breathe fresh air, and then get dunked right back down into it. That's what I got out of it. I'm going to hit the lyrics here, see what's going on, and then we'll wrap this video up. There are a lot of lyrics in this. I don't think it really dawned on me just how much of that 9-minute runtime had singing to it. There is one, I think there is a chorus. It is repeated only once, though. It shows up twice in the track. Everything else is brand new words, brand new poetry. It seems to be about somebody who attempted to outrun their pursuers, who are amorphous shadows. Never really describes what they are, but they are, well, it does, we do use the word dark tendrils, or black tendrils, and dark coils. They're called black hands that reach from the shadows. It's just this darkness, right, that chases them. And at the beginning of the story, they're done. They're exhausted. They have nothing, they have no other energy to run from this darkness, and it overtakes them. And it seems that they're put on trial for something and believe that whatever it is they're on trial for and the punishment given are all deserved. Our chorus leans into this very clearly. The shame, this avoidable failure, worthy of nothing but misery and pain, the tortures forthcoming deserved, sought for, considered, and paid for in full. So we have somebody who was attempting to outrun these shadows. When they were caught, they were, well, put on trial, assumed, and then a lot of this is just them being tortured, physically and verbally. And they say, yes, this is everything I deserve. Right? Why were you running in the first place, right? So that's when I started to think maybe this isn't a literal reading. And thankfully, to Paul, who had mentioned this, I do think this might be leaning more towards a mental health area. Because as soon as I take this back a level and go for a more metaphorical angle, things start to go into focus. It's very possible that they're not physically running from shadow people, but they're trying to escape the voices in their head that speak negatively of them. And it's not something that you can do by yourself for very long. Whether by yourself is, without a support network or possibly even without proper medication for it. And having to deal with these voices constantly putting you down for days, weeks, months, years. Eventually, you're going to become exhausted of it and succumb to it. And these thoughts are negative and they put you down, and eventually it becomes internalized and then self actualized. It becomes the story of your life because you begin to believe what these voices tell you. And I think that's where this comes in, this idea that you did fail and it was avoidable. You could have done something better. In fact, in retrospect, you should have done this. This was completely your fault, and thus you should be punished for it. And you just, yeah, I guess you're right. What's the punishment? And we talk about being, thrown down in the dirt and, I don't know, chained up in a cage. And it's just, it kind of goes a bit into some detail here. And then we get the voices. Did you really think it'd be so easy? Did you think you could get away? Do you think no one would notice? Do you think it was a simple escape? So it's possible that they succumbed to the voices and decided to fight back again and became exhausted again and were caught up in all this again. And it's a cycle. It really is. Mental health is not something you can win on your own. You might be able to stave it off on your own, but that's just going to lead to exhaustion every time. And then we get to a point where we really dig into some of the negativity that these voices are talking about. I think this was also another part where we had the side vocals rather than the center. Stuff like ungrateful, unloving, unaware of your luck, unstriving, unable to put forth work, self-involved, egotistic, like really just going down the list of all these negative things somebody could think about themselves. And we end the track on the chorus that says, from the narrator, I'm worthy of nothing but misery and pain. This punishment is deserved. And yeah, I'm really curious then where the guitar solo fits in this, because that is what I said was like a moment to breathe. It possibly could have been a moment of actually feeling loved, of escaping the voices for even just a moment. Um, and I do wonder where in this set of lyrics it shows up, because I think that it is an integral part of the story, and might actually provide its rest, its break from all the negativity. Where that break is in the story might actually have some import. But yeah, this story is just about succumbing to the darkness of mental health, of a mental health issue, of poor mental health. And the song feels like that. Every bit of it, like I had said, feels like you're tucked under a smog, and you know, continuously hearing negativity about yourself from within. That's a smog. That's a weight. It can pull you down, and getting outside of it for even a moment is a breath of fresh air. It's a moment to breathe. Those are my thoughts on Alustrium's The Accuser. This is where y'all come in. What'd you think of this? Did you enjoy it? Anything about it that stood out to you? Anything you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Let me know down in the comments. In the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. It's a bunch of stuff. Go ahead and check it out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three. All right, we have a creator request coming up. Otherwise, catch y'all tomorrow for an album review. I know we had one last week, I think. We're going to have a few back to back to back to back to back, and we're going to see how well I can do this. It's a pretty big work order, but we're going to see if I can do weekly album reviews and not get mentally exhausted, not burn out from this. Otherwise, though, Sunday's a live stream. I know I didn't get it up early this week, but I will next week. Sunday night, 5 p.m. Is what I'm aiming for everyone else to watch it. Of course, the stream itself will be 11 a.m. EST for the patrons. All right. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.